I came to interview a man who served 18 years for a murder he didn't commit. He was supposed to tell me who framed him. But when I turned on the recorder, he said, "If you're recording this, it means you're already part of the story. And it's not about me. My name is Nolan Brooks, crime journalist for the Sacramento Courier. I've built my career on stories no one believes, cold cases, judicial errors, frame-ups. But the Garrett Holloway case never fit the usual pattern from the very beginning. The rain beat against my windshield as I drove east on Interstate 80, leaving Sacramento behind. The wipers couldn't keep up with the downpour, making the illuminated highway signs blur into hazy halos. The GPS estimated another 40 minutes to the Nevada state line where Garrett had asked to meet. An old motel called The Pines, room 305. I'd been following his case for years before I ever reached out to him. Garrett Holloway, convicted of murdering his wife, Caroline, in 2004. The prosecution's narrative was clean, almost too perfect. He allegedly strangled her, locked her in their house, and staged a burglary. Everything pointed to him: fingerprints, motive, lack of alibi. Classic domestic homicide. But the deeper I dug, the more the foundations crumbled. Witness testimonies changed between initial statements and trial. One key witness, Caroline's co-worker who claimed to see Garrett's car at the house during the estimated time of death, vanished a week before the court date. Then there was Judge Raymond Pearson, who overruled defense objections with unusual frequency and handed down the maximum sentence. He died in 2009, carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. The official ruling: suicide. But no note was ever found. After 18 years, Garrett's conviction was overturned. DNA found on what was believed to be the murder weapon, a silk scarf, belonged to an unknown person. The system that had worked so diligently to put him away simply opened the door and let him walk out. No apology, no compensation, no search for the actual killer. Just administrative silence. My editor thought it was the perfect story: wrongful conviction, possible corruption, an innocent man's lost decades. Get his side, Nolan, she'd said. Make the readers feel what those 18 years cost him. The Pines came into view, a two-story L-shaped building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign missing the E at the end. I parked near the office, noting only 4 other cars in the lot. Perfect anonymity. The night manager barely looked up from his phone as I asked for room 305. "He expecting you," he stated rather than asked. "Yes," I replied, wondering how Garrett had described me. "3rd floor, end of the hall." He slid a physical key across the counter. "Elevators broken." The stairwell smelled of old cigarettes and cheap cleaner. Each step creaked, announcing my arrival long before I knocked on the door. I paused outside room 305, reorganizing questions in my mind. What makes a man survive nearly 2 decades for a crime he didn't commit? Who had the power to orchestrate such a perfect frame? What did he know now that he didn't before? I knocked twice. The door opened immediately, as if he'd been standing there waiting. Garrett Holloway bore little resemblance to his mugshot. The prison file photo showed a 35-year-old man with defiant eyes and tense jaw. The man before me was thinner, grayer, with a calm demeanor that seemed at odds with his situation. Only his eyes retained something familiar, not defiance now, but a peculiar intensity, as if he were seeing something just beyond what was actually there. "Mr. Brooks," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not challenging. "Thank you for coming all this way." The room was sparse but clean. A double bed with an olive green comforter. A desk with a chair. A small table by the window with 2 cups of coffee already poured. "I took the liberty," he said, gesturing to the coffee. "Black, right?" I hadn't told him how I took my coffee. "Lucky guess," he added with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I set my messenger bag on the bed and removed my recorder, notebook, and pen. Professional habits die hard. "Mind if I record our conversation?" That's why we're here, isn't it? He sat in the chair by the window, leaving the desk chair for me. But before you start, I need you to understand something. I agreed to this interview for a very specific reason. And it's not what you think. I raised an eyebrow. What do I think? That I want to clear my name. Set the record straight. Find justice. He took a sip of coffee. Those ships sailed a long time ago, Mr. Brooks. Then why did you agree to meet? Because you need to hear this. And I need someone to listen who might actually understand. I placed the recorder on the table between us and pressed record. The small red light blinked to life. Garrett stared at it for a moment, then looked directly at me. If you're recording this, it means you're already part of the story. And it's not about me. I felt a chill despite the room's stuffy warmth. I'm not sure I follow. I didn't kill my wife, he said. But I knew she would be killed. Because I had already seen it happen. My first thought was that this was a figure of speech, that he'd recognized warning signs in retrospect. But he continued before I could interject. 2 weeks before Caroline died, I found a photo album in our home that I'd never seen before. It was on my desk, under some bills. His voice remained steady, matter of fact. Inside were photographs of her funeral. People I'd never met. Arrangements I'd never seen. But they were all there, the flowers she'd always said she wanted, the dress her mother had preserved from their wedding day. And on the last page was a photo of me, standing beside her casket. Smiling. I wanted to ask a dozen questions, but he held up his hand. At first, I thought it was some sick joke. Someone breaking into our house to leave this, psychological terrorism. I was going to go to the police, but then I found something else. An old film camera we hadn't used since college. It still had film in it. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a manila envelope. I developed the pictures myself. We had a darkroom in the basement. Caroline was into photography back then. He carefully extracted a photograph and handed it to me. This is our living room. The one where they found her body. The photo was aged, its colors faded to sepia tones. It showed a standard suburban living room, a couch, coffee table, bookshelves. A man stood near the fireplace, a woman seated on the couch. Their posture was stiff, unnatural. That's not you and Caroline, I observed. No. But they're wearing our clothes. Standing exactly where we usually stood when we had company. Their faces. He leaned forward. Look closer. I studied the image. The man resembled Garrett in build and height, but his features were subtly wrong, as if someone had attempted to copy Garrett's face but missed certain details. And there was something odd about his placement in the room. The perspective seemed wrong, like he'd been added to the photo later. Or as if he'd stepped into it from somewhere else. A week later, Caroline was dead. Everything happened exactly as those photographs showed. The weather that day, unseasonably cold. The tie the detective wore when he came with the warrant. Even the way the coroner's assistant looked at me when they took her body away. I thought I was losing my mind. He took a deep breath. But in prison, I found more photographs. Polaroids slipped between the pages of books in the library. Moments that hadn't happened yet. Conversations I would have. And then one day, I found one of you. My pulse quickened. He reached back into the envelope and removed another photo. It was me. Sitting at this very desk, holding my recorder, with this motel room as the backdrop. The angle suggested it had been taken from where Garrett now sat. I found this 3 days ago, he said. I had no idea who you were until I received a letter from your publication in my mailbox. With this same photo on the letterhead. I frowned. I didn't send any letter with my photo. No, you didn't, he agreed. But someone did. I opened my notebook, flipping through recent correspondence. Nothing resembled what he described. Can I see the letter? It's in my mailbox downstairs. I'll show you after we finish. I made a note to check this claim. Mr. Holloway, are you suggesting someone is, what? Planting evidence? Following us? Orchestrating some elaborate scheme? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happened. His calm was unnerving. You're looking for a logical explanation. That's good. That's what I did too, for a long time. But logic has its limits, Mr. Brooks. Some things exist beyond what we're willing to accept. Like premonitions. Time slips. I tried to keep the skepticism from my voice. Like the possibility that time isn't what we think it is. He leaned back. Do you know what quantum entanglement is? Particles that remain connected regardless of distance, I recalled from a science article. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He nodded. What if moments can be entangled too? Past and future connecting, informing each other. What if some people can see those connections? I'd interviewed enough delusional subjects to recognize when someone had constructed an elaborate belief system. Yet something about his demeanor, the precision of his words, the lack of emotional effect, gave me pause. Mr. Holloway, I respect what you've been through, but... You think prison broke my mind, he interrupted. That I created this narrative to cope with an unimaginable injustice. But ask yourself this, if I knew they would find Caroline dead in our house, why would I leave all the evidence pointing to me? Why wouldn't I create an alibi? It was a fair point. The prosecution had emphasized that Garrett made no attempt to establish an alibi for the time of the murder. Because I thought I could change it, he continued, answering his own question. I thought knowing meant I could prevent it. I stayed away from the house that day, drove to the coast, called her every hour. When she stopped answering, I rushed home. Police were already there. My fingerprints were everywhere, it was my house. My DNA was on her, she was my wife. They found the scarf in my car trunk, a trunk I hadn't opened in weeks. The scarf with the unknown DNA, I clarified. Yes. The DNA that finally got me out. He finished his coffee. But they never looked for whose DNA it was, did they? Never questioned why the case against me was so perfectly constructed. Never asked who might have wanted Caroline dead, or me imprisoned. Did you have enemies? Everyone has enemies. But this was different. He looked out the window at the rain. This wasn't about hate. It was about something else entirely. A heavy silence filled the room. The recorder continued to blink, capturing it all. Since being released, have you received any more premonitions? I asked. Just the photo of you. And this. He pulled out a folded newspaper clipping and slid it across the table. It was from the Sacramento Courier, but I didn't recognize the article. The byline had my name, but the headline read, "He knew everything in advance, but couldn't stop himself." The date on the paper was next week. This isn't real, I said, examining the paper. This hasn't been published. Not yet, he agreed. But it will be. I placed the clipping next to the recorder. Mr. Holloway, what exactly do you think is happening here? He stood and walked to the window, his back to me. I think someone, or something, is allowing us to see fragments of time that haven't occurred yet. Not to help us, but to ensure we play our parts. Parts in what? That's what I've been trying to figure out for 18 years. He turned. At first, I thought I was the target. But I was just the beginning. There have been others, people who received photographs, premonitions. Most of them dismissed what they saw. Others tried to fight it, change the outcome. And what happened to them? Some disappeared. Others had accidents. A few ended up like me, taking the blame for things they couldn't possibly have done. I wrote quickly in my notebook. This was either the ramblings of a man broken by wrongful imprisonment or something far more complex. Either way, it was a compelling story. Can you provide names? People I could contact to verify this pattern? Most are dead or missing. He returned to his chair. But there was one detective, Martin Reeves. He worked Caroline's case initially, before it was reassigned. He started asking questions about inconsistencies in the evidence. 3 days later, he was found in his car at the bottom of the American River. Ruled a suicide. Like Judge Pearson. Exactly like Judge Pearson. Garrett nodded. Except Reeves left a note. It said, "I saw myself here yesterday. I'm just keeping the appointment." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'd like to look into these deaths. You should. But be careful what you go looking for, Mr. Brooks. His voice softened. Once you start seeing the patterns, they start seeing you. Who is they? I don't know. But they're watching. Always watching. He glanced at his watch. Our time is almost up. We've barely scratched the surface, I protested. I have dozens more questions. And I wish I had answers for you. He stood, gathering the photos and placing them back in the envelope. But some things you have to discover for yourself. At least tell me who you think killed Caroline. He paused, considering. I don't think anyone killed her, at least, no one with a name you'd recognize. I think she was a means to an end. They needed me out of the way, contained. Prison was the perfect solution. Why you? Because I could see. Like you can now. He handed me the envelope. Keep these. You'll need them. I took the envelope, confused. Need them for what? To convince yourself when things start happening. He moved toward the door. One last piece of advice, if you start seeing things that haven't happened yet, don't look into the eyes of whoever stands closest to you. They'll be waiting for you to blink. The cryptic warning hung in the air. Is that what happened to you? No. What happened to me was just the prelude. He opened the door. This story isn't about me, Mr. Brooks. It's about what comes next. With that, he stepped into the hallway. I expected to hear footsteps, but there was only silence. When I moved to the doorway seconds later, the corridor was empty. No sound of stairs, no closing doors. He had vanished. Back in the room, I examined the photographs again. The one of me was particularly disturbing, the angle, the lighting, everything matched this moment perfectly. I turned it over. Written on the back in faded ink, he asks too many questions. I glanced at the recorder, still running. When I played back the interview, I noticed something odd in the background noise, whispered words I hadn't heard during our conversation. A voice that wasn't Garrett's, saying, "He's one of us now." Before leaving, I remembered the letter Garrett had mentioned. I went to the front desk to check his mailbox, but the night manager looked at me strangely. "Nobody's checked into room 305 in months," he said. "That room's been under renovation since January." I showed him my key. "Then what's this?" He examined it. "That's not our key. Ours are keycards." I returned to the third floor. Room 305 was there, just as I'd left it. Inside were my coffee cup, my notebook. But Garrett's cup was gone. So was the recorder. Back at my apartment, I locked the door and emptied the envelope onto my desk. The photographs were still there, but they'd changed. The one of Garrett's living room now showed a body on the floor. The one of me now showed someone standing behind me, a blurred figure in a jacket similar to mine, holding what looked like my recorder. This morning, I found a printout on my desk. A new article, bylined with my name, but with Garrett Holloway's photo in the author box. The headline read, "He asked questions he didn't want answered." I've checked all the security cameras in my building. No one entered my apartment last night. I was alone. But when I look in the mirror now, something feels wrong. My reflection blinks a half second after I do. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch it smiling when I'm not. What if there are people who don't commit crimes, but know in advance who will, and can't stop it, because the photograph is already printed?